Hello and welcome to TOTECS, the platform for integrated e-commerce websites. Today I'll be taking you through the latest changes we've made to the TOTECS platform in the 11.02.1 sub-release and the 11.03 release. These changes are available to be utilized on any websites hosted on the TOTECS platform, allowing them to stay up to date and create great user experiences. In the 11.02.1 and 11.03 releases, 5 new features have been added to the platform, as well as 13 improvements and 11 bug fixes. You can find out more about all the changes in the release notes, which can be found on the TOTECS platform by going to totecs.com/forums.html, and then within there scrolling down to the release notes forums, where you can find all the changes made in these releases. To begin with, I'm going to show you a major improvement we've added to the platform to allow all content managed web page areas to be placed on secure web pages, and that allows a website to be fully secured with the HTTPS protocol, allowing locks to appear on web pages. What this feature enables us to do is on any web pages while navigating through a website is to allow them to be all running on the HTTPS protocol, allowing locks to always appear. So an example is if I just clicked on any of these menus, I could then go to any web page and we would always see this lock. Now, the reason why we want every web page secured on a website is because Google, when it ranks a website, it now factors in if it is running secured. So that means the data being loaded through the web pages has been securely transferred from the TOTECS servers down into the user's browser. The other critical component is that web browsers such as Firefox are now being reporting when users are entering certain pieces of information and the page is not secure. So with these two benefits in mind, we are recommending in TOTECS is for websites hosted on the platform to now be fully secured. Now, in order to be able to do that, there's a couple things that need to take place. And before I show you what needs to take place, it requires you to have a level of knowledge on how the security of websites work for any given website that is hosted on the internet. If you already know how security works, then you can skip ahead to the time shown on the screen. Otherwise, I'm going to give you a 101 on security of the internet so you can grasp the key concepts you need in order to be able to help secure your website. If we go to the diagram that I have here, in a normal use case, we have a computer that runs a web browser, and then we have the server that serves the websites. So here's an example where you've got yoursite.example.com, and then that is hosted on a server somewhere in the cloud or on network infrastructure. And then separately, we've got the user, and they're accessing the website for any kind of device, such as a PC or a mobile, a phone or a tablet or phablet or any other kind of device that is able to load up a web page. So the first step is for a user in order to want to navigate to a website. So they will make a request through the web browser to go to that website. What that happens in real life is that the computer of the user makes a request and sends it across the internet. So here I have, this blue page represents the request that computer is going to make in order to get a web page back from the website. So the first step is that this request has to go out through the internet, and that will typically go out through your internet router. So that's what this grey circle represents. The connection will then travel through to another computer, which would be typically your internet service provider or some kind of hardware that they're providing. And that could be an exchange or other telephone equipment. Then the request travels through any third-party computer hardware or software that is connected across the telecommunication network. So this could be government hardware, it could be other telecommunication companies' hardware, and usually it's going to go through several different pieces of telecom or government hardware. Then eventually the request will get to a data center, and that data center will have switches and other networking gear, so that way then it can then redirect this request to the final server that actually is hosting the website. Now, the server on the other end will see the request and it will return, in this case, it could be a web page or any other piece of data that has been requested by the originating user's browser. So here we have an example when the response contains the web pages and then it flows back through all the other links in the internet that allow that web page then to flow through all the way back to the user's browser where they can see that web page or the piece of other data that has been loaded. Now that's all very well and good, except that this piece of information in this web page has been able to be seen by all the different pieces of hardware and companies that request has had to go through. So the data center's been able to see it, the government or other telecommunications companies have been able to see it. Other ISPs or internet service providers have been able to see that request and the data within it. And even the internet router, if you're not using your own internet, that means if you're using the internet of a cafe or an airport or a hotel, then their routers have also been able to see all the content of that web page that has been delivered to your web browser. Now that's worked well for quite a while in the internet in the last 20 years. But the problem here is that this data is being captured by all these different companies and they're being able to snoop through and see what you're seeing. Now that has great insecurity connotations, and as we saw coming out from Edward Snowden, some of the government telcos are grabbing that data when these requests are made and they're actually making copies of it and storing it somewhere else while the originating data is being returned to the end user. So as you can see here, if you get governments or telecommunication companies that really want to store the data and store information about the what the user's seeing, that they can easily do this, and this is quite a security issue. This can include email addresses, include personal information about you such as names and phone numbers and credit card details. Any information that goes through the public internet can be siphoned off and stored in other places, as Snowden told us about how the US and UK and other governments have been storing such information in order to spy on people. So in order to protect the data being sent to and from the originating server, we have to introduce security and being able to lock and unlock the data when it travels through the internet. Now, fortunately, that mechanism has been built and it's called the Transport Layer Security, short for TLS, and previously people known it as Secure Socket Layer Security. So the way that the security works is that we introduce the concept of keys, and these keys are used to lock and unlock the data when it's reaches the end destination. So these keys, just like how there's keys to unlock the door to your house and then to lock the door to your house, are used to stop people from prying their eyes through these links on the data that's being transferred, so that only the server and the browser knows the kind of data that's being passed across. So the keys, there's two keys that make up this locking and unlocking process. We have what we call the public key, which is known as a certificate. And the other key we have is called a private key. So the first key is the certificate that is used to lock as what we call encrypt data that is being sent from the user's web browser. And the other key, the private key, is used to unlock the data that's being received by the server. So both these keys, they live on the server side. Now, in order to be able to lock, say, a request, data coming from the user's browser, we need to put the public key, the certificate key, that needs to be copied across to the user's browser. So when a request is first made to yoursite.example.com, the user's browser will receive the public key known as the certificate, which it can use to encrypt the data, establishing the connection. So in this case, that certificate file is used, the request is sent, and now that request becomes now locked. And now, because it is locked, none of the computers that receive and pass on the request are able to unlock the data that is being sent in the request, and vice versa when the data comes back the other way. So only once it gets to the server side will the private key be used to then unlock the originating request, when the server can then look at it and then pass the data back on, and then it is able, because a secure connection has been made, to lock the data back up again and send it back on its way to the user's browser, where the opposite process happens, where the browser then unlocks the data, such as we've done here. Now, there's a few more keys that are involved, but they're not really important. Now, any company can set up these public and private keys, but for the browsers, they don't know who they can trust and not trust with these keys. So this is when we get a third party involved called a certificate authority. So these are companies that we will trust in order to make sure that when the keys are given out, that the keys can be trusted themselves. So the public and private keys that are stored on the servers typically come from the certificate authorities. And examples of some certificate authorities is VeriSign, GeoTrust, Symantec, and there's a whole handful of other companies around that have authority to issue out these keys which can be stored on the server. So only if we want to allow secure websites to be trusted by all the computers, we need to get the websites that are serving content need to get their public and private keys from the certificate authorities. Now, the certificate authorities themselves, when they give out these keys, they sign these keys. That means there's basically a third key that's involved that says the public key is linked to the certificate authority's public key. And that certificate authority key, it's called the root certificate, is then it's stored on the user's computers and web browsers, as well as being stored on the servers. So we basically have now 2 public keys and 1 private key. So this linking of the public keys is called chaining, and it's important that we have the certificate authority on both sides of the equation so that the web browser says, because I've got this key, and because this public key that web server is using can be linked back to the originating certificate authority, we can trust when the data is being transferred and encrypted that it is coming from a trustworthy website as opposed to an untrusted website. Because the worst thing is we want is to give away sensitive information to websites that are not trustworthy. So now we have our keys in place. This allows the connections between the user's computer as well as the website to be encrypted and decrypted on either side, and then establish secure connections so that way data can flow through encrypted through the internet without any of these companies being able to unencrypt the data. Now, these companies can still see that the requests are being made. They're still passing on the requests themselves and the data themselves, but they can't see the content. So they can store the meta information, such as this computer has sent and received the request from that other web server, but they can't actually see what the content is. And the only way that they can see what the content would be is if they had the private key that was issued out from the certificate authority. So that makes this private key very sensitive. When a certificate authority issues out one of these private keys, it is important to keep it in a safe and secure place that is ideally stored disconnected from the internet. So don't leave it on a computer, put it in a thumb drive or some other location which is not directly connected to the internet, such as in a safe or other location. If this key gets obtained by any of these companies or any hackers, then potentially they can read all the data being transferred between the user's browser and the server. That's not a good situation to be in. So different certificate authorities will charge to have these keys generated, and they can cost from a couple of $100 or they can cost up to thousands of dollars depending the kind of certificate authority that you're purchasing off and how widely known that certificate authority based on how many computers they're installed on. So if you buy it off a unknown or a poorly known certificate authority, the chances are that most computers won't have their root certificate installed on those computers, whereas a widely known certificate authority will have their certificates installed on many browsers and computers. There's another part to the equation. When you purchase these certificates, these can be matched to only a specific website. So you need to buy the keys to match your website. It won't work if you buy them for another website that you're not in control of. Now, you can also purchase them, what we call a wildcard, for any subdomains as well. So you may have yourwebsite.com, but you may also have a subdomain called ecommerce.com. So if you had a wildcard, then you can get any subdomain, so anything.yoursite.example.com, you can have a certificate for, but the wildcard certificates typically cost more money. So it's really up to you to see which certificate authority you want to get your certificates from and which domains you need to purchase them for. So if we look at an example back here, we've got this site called mwd1.ghosquiz.com. We would have had to buy a certificate for that domain in order to allow that to get the security lock. And there's 2 other domains that we need to get the certificates for in order to be able to allow this site to be fully secured. And that's for the attachments, so the product files, as well as the ordering domain. Now, the certificates that you buy off the certificate authorities have an expiry date, so they don't last forever. You have to specify the period in time which you allow them before they expire. So if we had bought these certificates for yoursite.example.com, that means that copy of the public key, which is a certificate, would have been installed on the user's browser, and the browser's told for maybe 2 years that certificate exists. Now, if after 2 years expired, that certificate has not been repurchased and reissued from the certificate authority, then the browser will no longer like it, and it will say that it expires and you cannot make a secure connection anymore. It will provide warnings about trying to interact with that website. So you have to consistently keep purchasing these certificate keys off the certificate authorities. And typically, the certificate authorities will charge a higher amount if you want to purchase the keys for a longer period of time, such as 2 or 3 years, as opposed to purchasing for only 1 year. So you got to look at your website, how much are you willing to spend, which certificate authority you think is the best based on how widely they are regarded, and then once you have purchased them, then to provide the key files that the certificate authority has given you, and then so we can get them installed on the TOTECS service to secure all your web pages. So it's important to note that because these certificates have expiry dates, just like how with your domain, that you have to repurchase these every year or every 2 years or however long you want to for those certificates to last, that you need to make sure that you purchase them again before they expire, so that way we can get them installed on your website and the users never see any security issues and question the trust of your website. These certificates, they're called TLS certificates, but they're previously known as SSL certificate. If you search Google for SSL certificates, then you'll find the certificate authorities that come up that it can issue out those certificate files. If you have any trouble with this, I'd recommend talking to the TOTECS service guys, so that way we can help you purchase these certificates and get them installed where they need to go. So now you have a basic grasp of how the security of the internet is built upon to allow data to securely travel between a user's browser and the servers. Now we can look at how to upgrade your website so that every web page is now a secured web page and has the lock on the page itself. So the changes we've made to the 11.03 release is to allow all areas to be able to be placed onto secure content managed web pages. And so what that means is that we can have then all web pages on a website be secured. In this example, if we go to websites, go to the websites interface, we have a content managed website here called example.ghosquiz.com. Now currently that website, all of its pages, they're not secured. So the baskets page just contains the unsecured web page icon, and because that is associated with a web page template where its template mode is set to standard, which contains the HTTP protocol as opposed to HTTPS. So if we wanted to make all these web pages secured so that way that the users see the lock anytime they go to these pages, the new settings that we've added to the platform, if you go into the example.ghosquiz.com, go into the website details, there is now a setting here called website security mode. So this website is set to mix, where it both allows a combination of secured and unsecured pages. So what we want to do is we want to change this to now secured. Now, before you make any of these changes to fully secure a website, you want to make sure that you have provided the TOTECS service team with the security certificate that you've purchased off the certificate authority before you decide to make any of these changes. If you do it too early, you'll raise a lot of issues in the browser side. So we've got to make sure that those certificates are installed on the TOTECS platform before you want to make these changes to your website. Once you've done that, you've got to make sure the secure domain matches the website domain. So if it's set to something else, you need to make sure that both those settings are now the same. Once we've set the security mode to the website HTTPS and click the update site button, it is going to go through all the web pages and all the web page templates and now set them as secured. Once you are happy, and would recommend you only go through this process because your site is going to take time to make other components of your site fully secured as well. You want to be doing this in a quiet time during the week, such as after hours or when very few of your users are using your website. There is no easy way to go back once you've changed to security mode. So you want to be 100% sure that you're ready to do this. And if you're not sure, talk to the TOTECS service staff first, where we can then help you out if you want to enable to make this possible. So once we are 100% certain, we change the security mode, we click the update button. Now, if we look back at the website, all the pages now have a lock on them. So that now all these web pages have been fully secured, as well as the associated web page templates. Before, we had no security on those pages. Now these pages are now fully secured, and that means when Google will trawl through these web pages with its search crawler, it may help rank these web pages up because it sees now that they are running on the secure domain. Now, this isn't the end of changing the settings. The other part we need to do now is we need to make sure that any links within these templates have got the secure protocol set for the URLs. So if we go into the web page templates themselves and open the files, we need to spot that if there are any URLs in the file that have the old HTTP protocol in the URL, we need to change them to be HTTPS to denote that all the content and all the files being loaded on that web page are being loaded over secure connections. So in this case, the base href of this web page is now being changed, and we have to do the same for any images or any other files. So in this case, we have to update that. Now we also have to do the same process for any web page formats that have been created as well. So if we go into the web page format libraries, we need to go through each and every single local web page area format that has been created. So in this case, I'm looking at any kind of web pages that contain products and product detail. We need to go into each of the formats, each of the local formats. So they're the ones that are in green, that are local to that website, that have been created for it. And we need to find anywhere where there are references, absolute references to loading images or any other CSS and other file content onto the web page. So in this case, we have an example where there's an image file. We need to make sure, and that is referencing this website. So we need to make sure that its protocol is changed to HTTPS. Otherwise, the web browsers will say that there is a problem loading this image because it's meant to be loaded on a secure web page, but you're trying to load it from an unsecure server location. So we can't, every single link in the web pages needs to be now using HTTPS. Now, once you've done that for all the local formats, for any areas that are assigned to global formats, when you updated the security mode of the entire website, if it was using these formats that are in orange, there has been secured, the equivalent secured formats that areas will be reassigned to. So if you wanted to ever revert back, then you would have to change all the areas back from the secured formats back to the insecure formats. So it's definitely not recommended to do the backwards process because it is quite a time-consuming process. So once you've gone through all the formats and done that, the last part is you need to go through all the web page areas, and if there's any links of images or CSS or anything within the free draw areas on the web pages, you need to update the protocol in them as well from HTTP to HTTPS. So we expect that it will take around 2 to 3 hours in order to set up the security of the domain itself in the TOTECS platform, and then another 3 or 4 hours to go through all the web page area formats, go through all the free draw areas and any other links on your websites that could have insecure links to content. Now, you can do that yourself, or you can get the service guys in TOTECS to help you do that implementation work. Once that's all been done, then all your content across your websites you should be now seeing the secure lock, and then there's no issues presented to the user, and then people can easily navigate through your website knowing that any content that appears on the web pages, whether it's sensitive or not sensitive, has now been securely transferred between the TOTECS servers and the web browser without any other people being able to see the content that is displaying on these web pages. Now, previously, once you created a website and you wanted to add an area, so let's say, for example, we wanted to add an area to the home page. If it was on a secure web page, you were limited when you try to add a new area to the page, where you could only choose from a few areas. But because now the website is fully secured, you can now use all the areas on secure web pages. allowing to have full security of the functionality on those web pages. So that's another benefit that we've added, and we've gone through painstakingly through each and every single area type as well in order to make sure that the links that those areas generate for both product images and links to other pages is putting the correct protocol and making sure that they behave as they should, and make sure that there's no issues being presented to the browsers. In the TOTECS Forum release notes, you can see all the areas that we've touched in going through this process of upgrading these areas. If you have any questions, feel free to post on the TOTECS Forums, where we're happy to answer any security-related questions. The next new features that we've added to the TOTECS platform in the 11.03 release are 5 new areas to the content managed websites that allow account inquiry to be formed to be able to look up transactions, credits, and payments. In our master website design example here, logged in as a sales rep user in this case, and I have a web page here called Transactions, and on this page, one of the 5 new areas that we've created called Customer Account Inquiry Transaction Listing, and this area makes a connection in real time to the connector to retrieve information about the account that the user is signed to, and then return back the transactions that have been performed with their customer account from the connected accounting system. So in this case, for this account, we can see that there are a number of transactions that have taken place where sales orders have been created, back orders have been created, invoices, payments, credits, and we can see the dates that they've been created and the balance that has been caused by these invoices being created or payments being made. So it makes it nice and easy, just like how if you were looking at your bank balance for your customers to see how much money and what's their balance on their account and see what transactions have been taking place. So the area itself, there's a couple of filters, so we can change how far back should we search through. So they may only want to get the last 0 to 30 days or the last 30 days of transactions, or they want to get up to the last 6 months. So these filters, once this filter takes place, there's another request made in real time to get that data from the connected accounting or ERP systems. The other filter we have, if we have multiple pages of data, then users can also paginate through the area and find that. For the different types of transactions that can take place, we can have links to the corresponding record to be able to take the user to the relevant page that displays information, in this case about a back order or that sales order. So users can click on that to find more information if they need to. Each of the links to the different kinds of record can be set to a different kind of content managed web page. So when I click on the back order link, I can have a page set up specifically just to show the details of a given back order. Now this gets into the next new area that we've created, is the ability to retrieve the details of a back order record. So as we saw here, this was a request made live to the connector where it got the details, so we can see each of the lines that was in the back ordered, how many were ordered, how many were back ordered, and the pricing for that back order. And if there's other pieces of information available, we can also show that in this form. So these areas are completely customizable in terms of look and feel. We don't need to have the logo there. We could hide the logo, we could put it in a different location, we could change all the information about it. We could make these areas look and feel the same as how the invoices or records were coming out of the accounting system if need be, as well as make them look different if they were to be printed as opposed to displayed on the screen. These areas, they're pulling at the same kind of data if you were using the trade interface, but you have all the flexibility on how they're styled and the look and feel works. That shows you how the transaction listing area, the back order detail area, we can also retrieve a list of all the back orders. So we've set up a page here called back orders, and that's made a request in real time. So here's a number of back order records that we've pulled from the accounting system. And then just like how we do with transactions, we can have a search filters. So if we want to change the date range, you want to filter by. If there's multiple pages, you can also allow the user to paginate through. And the same goes for the fourth new area we've created, is the customer account payments listing area. And just like how with the back orders and the transactions, we can now allow the user to see all the payments that are being retrieved live in real time from the connected accounting system. And if they want to, then they can then click on to go through to a page that will show the details of the payment itself. So in this case, this payment was made against 2 invoices, and we have the lines of those invoices and the amounts that were paid, and it's all completely customizable in its look and appearance and the location of where data is placed within it. One difference with the payments area is you can also search on a given payment. So let's say we put in this number. We can see where it has found one record that matches this payment number, so it makes it easier for users to find a specific payment that they're looking for. If you clear that field and search again, then you'll get the originating payments list that comes out as well. Once again, you've got the date range filters if you want to filter down to only the last month or 2 months. In this case, it's found no records, whereas over the past year, it's been able to find all the different dates that are available. So if we go into the administration side about setting up these new kinds of areas, if we go under the websites and into the websites interface, if we look under the web area format libraries, under the account inquiry section, we've got a number of new areas that are being created. So we've got the customer account transaction listing, the payments listing, the payment itself, the credit listing, and the credit areas. And each of them is very similar in how they're configured. So if we look at the credit listing, there's 3 formats that are available. So we have one format which is control the overall styling and placement of the area itself. So that format is controlling the labeling, which location should the search boxes be, and whereabouts should the information about the paginators be as well as the labeling of the headers of the columns that appear within the area. We also have a format called the customer account record format, and that's to style each of the records that appears here for the credits that have been found. So you can change the styling, you can change the order in which the data appears in. Maybe you don't want to allow the user to click on a link for the credit code. You may want to change the labels to meet what is most applicable to your business. You may want to change the background colors and styling for each credit record. So that's what this customer account credit record format is doing. As we can see here, there's the markup, the HTML markup that controls all of that. If we go into the customer account credit area, that has 4 formats that are listed here. So the customer account credit, the customer account credit line item, and the customer account credit line text, and if an error message format if the data could not be obtained, maybe because the link is down between the accounting system and TOTECS at that time, or there's been an error while retrieving the data from the accounting system. The customer account credit format, that controls the overall layout of the credit record. So if we look at that format, that's controlling the labeling, that where the logo, where the details of both the billing and delivery address of the credit information, and about the headings for the lines, and as well as the overall totals. All of that can be then moved around into where it needs to go and styled accordingly based on this format. The other formats controls the actual individual lines themselves, so we can format how each of the lines appear, so controlling what data that displays in which cell. If you want to display it in a list style or a table style, and put the item number maybe right of the description field or the unit price in another form. It's up to you whether or not you want to show the $sign or not. That is all customizable using the customer account credit line item format. Now, if the line itself had a comment or a piece of text as opposed to a product assigned to it, then this format would get used instead, as we see here with our example credit text, where it has no calculations or prices or item code assigned to it. It's just purely a text or a comment line. So that format controls how that is styled and the data that is displayed for those lines. If we look at the other areas, it's very similar on the formats that exist. So in the customer account payment listing, once again, we have an overall format that controls the layout of the payments. Then we have a format that controls each individual payment record that is displayed in the area. And then we have another format that displays the error message if no data could be retrieved. And vice versa for the customer account payment, a format that controls the overall layout of the record itself, and then formats that control the lines, or as well as the error message if the data could not be obtained. For the customer account transaction listing, it is almost identical to the payment listing and the credit listing, where we have a format for the overall formatting of the area, and then we have a format for each of the individual transaction record lines that appear in the area, as well as a format for the error message. So each of them can be configured to taste based on how these areas need to work in the account inquiry. Now, the last part is to actually create these areas on a given web page. So if we go into, for example, the transactions web page, a customer account transaction listing area has been created, and this area has a few customizable options. So we can change how many transactions should display per page, and that will reduce the amount of data that appears. So if we change it to 5 and update the area, you can see that it is now displayed the paginator, showing that there's more pages of data for the user to be able to then filter through. So as you can see here, the user can navigate between more pages, being able to see less data initially when it loads. So that's what that setting controls. We also can control which page should users be taken to when they click on different types of records. So in this case, where we had that the first record is a sales order, we can control what page the user will be taken to when they click on that link by being able to configure the sales order setting here and choosing the page where they should go to. And you can do that for all the different types of records that appear in the list of transactions. So we can control it for invoices, the back orders, the payments, the credits as well. So that makes sure that we can have different pages styled for the different types of records that the user will be viewing from the transactions listing area. We also have another setting, which is what is the default date range that should bring up the records and do the searching when the area is first loaded, when the page loads. So the date range can greatly factor in how fast the page loads, because it depends on how far back the connector has to search through the accounting system in order to retrieve the data. So ideally, you don't want to make it too far away, especially if it's customers that do a large volume of transactions. Then maybe you might want to set the default to be only the last 30 days or only the last 2 or 3 months. If the date range is greater, the amount of data that needs to be retrieved is greater, and some accounting systems are just not that good or that fast at retrieving large sets of data. So you need to really work out what is the optimal based on your accounting system that you've configured. So if we change that setting down to only the last 2 months, save the area, and then refresh the page, you can see now that the date range by default when the page first loaded has selected the last 2 months as opposed to the last 1 or 2 years, or how it was previously set. Now, if we go back to the other pages, so if we go to the payments page and view that, this will contain the payment listing area, and this listing area is very similar to the transaction listing area, so we can control the amount of payments displayed per page and which page, when you want to view the detail of a payment, where the user needs to be taken to, and how far back in the date range should users display payments for. So once again, you configure it to your taste. And if we go through to also the credits page that we've got set up here, where we've got a credit listing appearing on the page, and then we've got the same kind of settings to be able to configure which page will display the details of the credits, how many results should display per page, as well as how far back should we search for credit records. Now, if we go into each of the individual pages that show the details, we will be able to see the customer account credit area. And in this case, the customer account payment area has no configurable options. So there's no web pages that the users can be directed to within that area. So it's purely just down to setting up the formats for the area and then letting the platform do all the data retrieval for it. So it reduces the amount of time and effort in order to set that up. And the same is true for credits as well. If we go to that area, the customer account credit has also no configurable options. So using all these 5 new customer account inquiry areas, that brings all the account inquiry functionality that was previously only in the trade interface is now being brought across into the content managed website, allowing for beautiful looking lists of accounts and record information that you want to display to your users who are ordering through your business. Now, with all these customer account inquiry areas, the user needs to have the ability to have permissions to view this data in order for these areas to be able to show, and there must be a link set up to the accounting system through the connector, and that must be up and available for these areas to be able to show as well. So there is a few configurations in order to allow that to take place. So if we go back to the admin center and go into the user permissions, there needs to be facility role permissions set up to allow account inquiry to be enabled. And if you've got any other questions, just feel free to post them on the forums where we can answer any comments or queries you've got about account inquiry for content managed websites. The next new feature we've added to the TOTECS platform has been taken also across from the trade interface, where if a sales rep is logged into a content managed site and they want to view the details of a product, in the example site we have here on the shopping cart page, the user has the ability to click on an information button, which will bring up a dialog showing the details of the product. And as we saw in 11.02 release, there is the ability for a sales rep user to see all the price level prices that exist for that product. The improvement that we've added is to also be able to show the cost price, and that's the average cost price for the sales rep user to see what is the underlying costs. If they choose to discount off this product price, they can see how much at most they should be discounting by based on the rules of the business. So this area, this is the product details area, and it has the ability to show the price level prices and now the average cost price. Now this average cost will always appear at the top of the list of the product prices. And if you want to find more information about how to set up this area itself, the 11.02 release video goes into more detail. The only other aspect is that there is now a setting within the administration center that controls the labeling of the average cost price. So this label here can be configured if we go into the administration center. If we click on the inventory menu and go down to the products settings interface, and a new setting has been added here called product average cost price label, and so you can change this label to whatever is the most appropriate label. So you may, instead of calling it cost price, you may call it average cost price. Once you've changed that, just scroll down and click on the save button, and once that setting's been changed, then if you click on the information icon and then you scroll down again, you can see that now the label is changed to average cost price based on that setting within the administration center. Of course, for the user to be able to see this, they must be set up as a sales rep user. So if we look at our user, we can see that in the user details, they have been selected as a sales rep user and they've been assigned to a sales rep ID. As well as they're being assigned to a user permission role. If we go down to there, and if we find the user itself, we can see that there's been a facility role created for them called sales rep, and then the sales rep user has all the permissions enabled. And then what is of in particular importance is that this permission here called view product average cost pricing, only if that's enabled for the users assigned to that role, they are then allowed to see the average cost price. So those permissions ensure that only the correct users are allowed to see this pricing information and not your normal regular users who are ordering. The next feature we've added to the TOTECS platform is on the Content Managed website. On a basket products listing area, we now have the ability to restrict whether a user is allowed to proceed through the checkout based on the status of their account. So there are new hooks have been added to the area where we can display a message similar to this, or we can customize the way that the message is displayed to stop the user from being able to check out. So we can bring up a message such as that their account is on hold and that they are unable to submit orders. So once again, this is another feature that we've taken from the trade interface that we've brought into the Content Managed website to ensure that users cannot submit orders unless their account is in good order. So in this area, we can configure it that if the account was blocked, and then for that account, it wasn't allowed to proceed through the checkout process, that we could display a message and instead display a button that says, took them to the account inquiry, where they could then load up their invoices and pay for those invoices. So a few hooks have been added to the area. There's a hook to be able to set the status, and the status of an account can either be set to block, warn, or OK. And then we can configure elements to display styling based on the status of that account. Additionally, there's a hook to be able to display the message, and that message is customizable based on the different status. So there's already settings within the administration center to be able to control the different messages that display. Within the Administration Center, if we click on the Stores menu and go into the Checkout Settings interface, if we scroll down to the Customer Account Validation messages, here is where we can change that message that is set based on the status of their account. So at the moment, we've got an account of a user and their account is being blocked from being able to order, and because it's on hold. So that's where that message was being set. If we wanted to change the message that we're displaying here, we could just simply change this setting, and maybe we wanted to change this message to your account is being placed on hold and you must pay outstanding invoices. Now, once we've saved that setting, so scroll down and click the save button. Now, if we refresh the page, once the page is refreshed, if we scroll down, you can see that now we've got that completely customized message that now displays to the user in terminology that they will understand. If the account was set to warn, we could show the message in a different color or different styling based on how you want it to appear. And then we can also allow the user to check out, but still display a button that allows them to pay for invoices. So this is one way we could configure this area in order to be able to handle the fact that their account is outside, it's on hold, is outside its payment terms, or is outside its account balance. Now, to do this, from the Administration Center, if we went down to the shopping basket and went into the basket products listing, within there in the basket product footer and header, there have been new hooks that have been added, and these are called basket checkout status. So that's showing us the status of their customer account, as well as basket checkout message. So that's the message that's getting displayed. So we can then embed that into the area's HTML and then style it as need be. So there's those two new hooks that have been added. Now, on a content managed side, to allow the customer account blocking feature, a new setting has been added under the Stores menu within the Checkout Settings interface. There is now a setting here called Check Users Account Status in Interfaces. So this by default is set to trade, so only this checks occur in the trade interface. But if you're doing business to business through the content managed site, you need to then set this to be set to both, to allow it on both content managed sites as well as trade interface or the content managed site, or not at all. So if this is set to none, then these checks, this blocking or warning checks will not display, and the user will be able to proceed through normally. If they are set to on, then those checks will be made. And because of that, the user login, if they're set to content managed websites, then the user login process may take longer if there's live checks to see the account balance as well. So it's important just to make sure you configure this in based on what is best for your business and your website. By default, ideally to have these settings turned off, because then it allows the website to load fast. But if you must have up to the second status of the account, then these checks can be turned on, but make sure there's a live link to your accounting system. The next new feature we've added to the TOTECS platform is within the content managed websites again, under the websites within the Administration Center. In the websites interface, previously, if you had multiple content managed websites created for the one TOTECS project, you could not set the same page name for pages that exist across multiple websites. So in this case, we've got mwd1.ghostquiz.com, so we've got a page here called Home. We could not have another page called Home within this example.ghostquiz.com website. So the changes we've made is now there's ability to create a web page with the same name as another web page on another content managed website. Now that's a minor change, but what it then allows us to do is then set up multiple websites, and we might have a new website that we're working on that is going to be the next version, and then it allows us to set up all the correct page names as we're building that second or third site, preparing it to release out in the future. So previously we would have to put in prefixes or suffixes and then change them at the time we wanted to make this website go live, whereas now there's no longer a need to do that. So this change should help speed up the deployment of new content managed websites and make it easier for implementers to build these websites at the time. The other improvement we made to the website's interface, if you're setting up web page area format libraries, when you're creating or modifying a web page library, such as we've got here, we've now extended the length of what the format name can be. Previously, it was limited to 30 characters. Now we can have up to 100 characters, which allows for these kind of long named formats. So that's another small change which makes it easy for implementers to put more meaningful names of the formats that are styling the websites themselves. The next improvements we've made to the TOTECS platform are to do with the content managed website again, and the improvements have been made into the category tree nested navigation and category tree panel navigation areas that we introduced in the 11.02 release. So just to give you a overview of that again, so those areas control the ability for users to be able to navigate down through category trees quickly and easily, both in this drill down format, or if on larger browsers, if we change the size of the browser in this drill down format, like so with these drop down category tree menus. The changes we've made to these areas is to introduce new formats into these areas to be able to style the individual category records. So each category that you see here has a corresponding format that is used to be able to display how that category looks in this tiled menu. Now, the change that we've added is if a category is what we call a leaf, or means it is a category that there are no more children for, there is a different format to style the category record. Otherwise, if a category did have more children, such as adhesive tape and glue that we've shown here, that does have more child categories. So we've now got a format that is set up to be able to separately style that category record. So that means that it's much easier for implementers to put in functionality such as here we're showing an arrow to visually tell the user that there are more categories that exist, whereas for other categories which are considered leaves of the category tree, that we don't set that arrow. Now, by being able to introduce separate formats into these areas, it reduces the amount of code that needs to be downloaded by the web browsers, allowing the web page to load faster and take less time in order to render these category menu navigation areas. So if we go into the administration center, once again under the website's interface, go into the web page area format libraries within the product category. In both the category tree nest navigation and category tree panel navigation, new formats have been added called branch record and leaf record, and these allow that separate styling that we showed before to occur. So this is where we can put very customized styling of how these category records appear within these menus. And if you want to find more information about setting up these areas, I recommend watching the 11.02 release video, which contains all the details about how those areas work. The next improvement we've added to the TOTECS platform is within the basket products listing area within a content managed website. And if a sales rep is logged into the content managed website, the area could be configured to display inputs that allow the rep to change the pricing of the products that have been added to basket. So as we have here, they can change the price of the product in the basket, they could change the amount that's been discounted by, and they can also change the quantity. Now, the improvements we've made to the platform is that when the user changes different pieces of information, we may or may not want the platform to recalculate the pricing based on the volume discounts that are applicable to this product. So for products, this archive box, when the rep changes the discount, once the discount has been changed, then we may not want the volume discounts to apply to that line. So we may want to change the pricing and not affect the quantity. But there may be a circumstance where if the quantity is changed, we want to reset the discount, which is happening here, and that gets reverted back. So that means that we want the platform to override the previous discount that the sales rep set for the product and instead recalculate the pricing of the product based on any volume discounts that apply for the account that sales rep is assigned to. So we've added hooks to each of these inputs to allow or not allow the platform to continue to use the discount as applied against the line and to recalculate the pricing or not. And so there's hooks that have been added. If we go back into the administration center interface, under the websites menu, if we go to the websites interface and we scroll down to the web page area format libraries, under the shopping basket within the basket products listing area, in the basket product record, if we go into that format, there's been some new hooks that have been added. And the hooks that have been added are update product on change X discount, so that's excluding discount. So when the product quantity or product pricing, when the product pricing changes or any changes are made to those fields, do we want to update the product and exclude any previous discounts that are applied against the product when recalculating the pricing of the product? And that's the same, can be applicable on the key press. So these hooks get added to the inputs that are embedded within the format to enable that this discounting or exclude the discounting and reprice the products based on these hooks that have been available here. So these hooks, it's not just in the basket products listing area, it's also in the product details and the product search areas where these hooks are being added. Based on how your sales reps work, you can configure how the pricing and the discounting should be made available when they use the interface. And if you've got any more questions about this, you can always ask on the forums as well. The next improvement we've also added to the website's interface is if we're modifying our web page area formats. There's been a new global hook that has been added to the list of hooks. So global hooks, if you're unaware, these are hooks that can be embedded with any web page area format, and then it can show whatever data that hook displays. So in this case, the new hook that we've added called SES_account company name. So that means the customer account assigned to the user at the time, and if they're a sales rep user, that will change when they change accounts, will be reflected in this variable here. So that can be embedded onto any content managed web page, which makes it nice and easy for sales reps when they change accounts, or for when users, when they log in with a specific account, they can see the company name associated with that account. To see an example of that in action, we could have embedded that company name within the header of our master website design website here, and then you can see the account code as well as the account name displayed for that based on that account that a user is using at the time. And if the sales rep had changed accounts, then that area could update itself to show the new company that the sales rep is ordering on behalf of. And that gives you a wrap-up of the new features and functionality we've added into the 11.03 and 11.02.2 releases. If you want to find out any more information about the bugs or other changes that we've made, feel free to head to the TOTECS Forums and ask any questions or comments about functionality, and we're happy to answer your questions there. Until next time, happy online trading.